All right. New series prepping for Easter. Getting ready. Reese eggs all the days. And what is it just me? I'm the only one excited for Reese eggs, I guess. Jeez, oh Pete. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. What? Cadbury Mini. Look at this. Susie's got Susie's got expensive tastes. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. So we're kicking off the series Famous Last Words, looking at some of the phrases that Jesus shared with his closest friends uh, right before he was to die. And diving into it, I kind of want to listen. I want us to look at these um, famous last words. This is from Leonardo da Vinci. I've offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have. Then we have Bob Marley. Money can't buy life. The famous reggae singer. Money can't buy life. Are you guys ready? Let's roll. Todd Beamer famously said on September 11th as they took down the terrorist cells and crashing that plane, saving countless lives that day. And then happy anniversary, I love you, the famous football coach Vince Lombardi sharing with his wife before he dies. And there's something that happens with last words because they're powerful, right? When we know the last thing we're going to share with those that we love, with the people we care about, we want them to have an impact, to be powerful, to leave a legacy and a mark. And you can hear that as Leonardo da Vinci is talking about how he had limitless potential, but only if he had more time. Todd Beamer's famous words that have resounded throughout history. Bob Marley sharing his feelings and beliefs, spreading that idea throughout generations. Last words mean something. Last words are powerful. And they matter because of when they were said. They matter because when they were said. At the end, right before, because they wanted it to be that lasting legacy, that thing that was going to propel people on, that was going to make them think. And Jesus was the same way. He's hanging out with his disciples, and he knows they don't know, but he knows that they're almost done. That they're almost done. And he needs to lead and leave a mark for those guys. And here's the thing, because we want them to be remembered, right? But the problem is, especially when it comes into our relationship with God, that forgetfulness can sometimes be one of the biggest barriers to us having a healthy relationship with God, right? Forgetfulness can be one of the biggest barriers because as soon as we get sick, we start thinking, why did God do this to me? Why did I know that that fish didn't look right. But, God in his infinite wisdom, why did you put it in front of me? You knew I'd eat it. And now I'm puking. My best friend's a toilet. And and we forget, and you totally forget, right? In those moments of tension, when you're hurling out your guts, you forget the 300 days of healthy, fun living. All you can think about is the now, right? All we can think about is how I'm feeling today. And when there comes tension, and when there comes stress, and when there comes hurt in our lives, we easily forget how God showed up through the good times, how he took care of us, how he watched for us, how he was there. But in the tension, in the dark times, in those painful times, that's when we're asking the questions. Where were you? What happens? Why have you forgotten me? And it's in pain and hurt that this forgetfulness comes up and shows up. And it stops us from having a healthy relationship with God. It stops us from leaning into him and remembering those good things that he has done and how he has provided and how he has taken care of us. The same thing is true with our parents, right? Your parents take care of you, you go home, they feed you, they asking you how school's going, they're giving you rides places. But the minute they tell you no, or they take away your phone, or they refuse to upgrade your smart plan, why? You're so mean. You're such a jerk. No other parents are like this. And we tend to forget because we're going through pain and frustration. I was the same way. I would be like, Mom, why? Why did you do this? All I wanted was macaroni and cheese. And you got apple slices. Like, still a little worked up over it. That was a little more painful than I thought it would be. But we tend to forget it. So how can we I went too far. How can we make sure our attention and focus isn't consumed by bad things in life? How can we make sure that our attention and our focus isn't consumed with bad things in life? Because let's be honest, bad things happen all the time. It's hard to watch the news today. It's hard to get through Talkback 16 because there's bad news happening all the time. There's stress, pain, hurt, frustration, and it can drain your focus. And that's just what's happening to people out there. That's not even what's going on inside of your life. When utility bills aren't being met, when the food isn't at your house, when you're wearing the same clothes to school this year as you did last year. How do we not become consumed by these thoughts and emotions and focused on the negative, losing our close relationship with God, losing and forgetting how God has showed up throughout the good days? How do we do that? And so to go and to kind of share that, we have to go way far back. We have to go way far back. Early in the book of the Bible, Genesis, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, Israel was enslaved by Egypt. They were under Egyptian rule. They were building pyramids, getting whipped. They were the scum. Nobody liked them. Egypt was like, that's how they were building their empire, on the back of Israel. And it was a tense, dark time. There's not enough food. There's not enough clothes. There's not a future happening inside of Israel. And all of a sudden, here comes this guy showing up. His name's Moses. And Moses comes to the Israelite people and he's like, God has told me I'm taking you out of slavery and taking you into a land that you can call your own. And there's this glimpse of hope. There's this possibility of hope. And Moses goes up to Pharaoh and he says, hey, Pharaoh, I'm going to take the Israelites. We're going to go start our own nation. Thanks for nothing. And we'll see you never. Deuces. And Pharaoh goes up to Moses and he's like, no. And he tells him, you're not taking my slaves, you're not taking this labor force. I got some pyramids to build. The Sphinx needs a buddy, and we need to make it happen, son. So no, you can't take them. You can't take the economy. You would destroy my nation. And so Moses is like, listen, I'm only going to ask you once. And then some bad things are going to start happening. And Pharaoh does what all tough guys do. Bring it, son. That's how I imagine it in my head, though. It's a lot of action movie. Lots more explosions than there probably were. But Moses comes up to him and he's like, listen, if you don't let the people go, God's going to bring plagues into the land. And Pharaoh says, try. And so God brings plagues. There's locusts, there's frogs, river runs through, there's blood. And all throughout it, all these terrible things happening, one after the other, after the other, after the other, destroying the harvest, destroying people's homes, property, frustrating people, scaring people. Can you imagine going out and getting water and all of a sudden blood like comes out of your faucet? That would be terrifying. Terrifying. Like we watch the Veggie Tales and it's like, oh, this little red stream. There's blood coming out of your faucet. This is like freaks, frogs everywhere. Can you imagine flipping over the covers and there just being frogs? like that's messed up, right? Locusts, just a giant swarm of flying grasshoppers that eat everything. I recently watched, because I am, as we know, a very eclectic man. I watched a documentary on plagues that happen in Australia. And they have locust plagues about every 7 years. And they have mice plagues about every 10 years. Mice plagues. Where they kill so many with poison that they literally do not have enough places to put the body. Millions a day. Again, like we think plague and we're like, oh, there's quite a bit. No, this is like millions. Like we don't know where to put the bodies. That's how much disgusting there is. And all throughout this, Moses is saying no. Or Pharaoh is saying no. You cannot take the people. Hit after hit after hit after hit. The people are getting frustrated. They're getting hurt. They're seeing the only things they know being destroyed and ravaged. They have no idea what God has planned. Finally, the last plague comes. Moses tells Pharaoh, I'm going to kill the firstborn in every house throughout Egypt if you do not let my people go. And Pharaoh does what Pharaoh's been doing this whole time. Bring it. And so to save the Israelite people, God told Moses, tell them, sacrifice a lamb, a pure lamb, take the blood, put it over your doorway. And when I come through, if I see the blood over the doorway, that is my sign that I will leave that house alone. Night falls. Death comes. It's a morbid picture. As people are waking up to dead children all over Egypt. And Pharaoh stands up and says, get out of here. Releases the Egyptian people, or the Israelite people, to go and start their own nation. And that moment of sacrifice and pain also became a moment of freedom and future for the Israelite people. And what they did every year, they would get together for what they call the Passover, to remember how God passed over their homes to get them out of Egypt. And they would use unleavened bread to signify and remember how quick they had to get out of there. They couldn't even let the dough rise. They had to get out of Egypt. And they would take wine to signify the blood that was spilt, that kept their children safe. See, they made a habit of remembering a time every year that they would get together and remember how God is for them and what God did to bring them into their new nation. And it was a heavy time, it was a hard time. And at this dinner, Jesus is sitting there with his disciples. The last time that they were going to have the Passover together, the last meal that they were going to share. Having all of this history, having all of this meaning, Jesus comes to the table. He says this. He took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He took the bread and he created a new history for it. And I can imagine the disciples are there because they don't know Jesus is going to die. They don't know how he's going to die. They don't know what's coming. Like, this is a body and given for. This is a little different, Jesus. I don't know if you've been to a Passover before, but this is not usually what it represents. But he's taking these, what had meaning, but was everyday, pita bread, everyday object, and instilling it with a new value. And it wasn't the pita bread that was important. It was the idea behind it. And then he follows it up with this. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This is the cup of the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you." He took wine, everyday item that they would have experienced, with history, and infused it with new meaning and new purpose. See, Jesus made two of the most ordinary parts of their lives significant. Jesus made two of the most ordinary bread and wine. Just two ordinary ideas, and he made them significant. He gave them power because of what he did. And the reason Jesus did this is because he knew what was coming. He knew that there would be a trial, and it would just be a circus. He knew there'd be a brutal death. He knew there'd be dark days. He knew he'd rise again. He knew he'd leave them again. And he knew that they would leave Jerusalem and experience all sorts of amazing things and all sorts of terrible things. And as they were going out and as they were moving and as they were living their life and as great things came and as terrible things came, they would need an everyday reminder of an amazing action. Something that they could take and look at and say, God has not forgotten me. And that's what we need to do. We need to remember what God has done for us. We need to remember what God has done for us. How God has taken care of us, how God has shown up for us, how God has given us blessings and kept us out of danger and trouble, allowed us opportunities to even be here. How we have this blessing. We need to remember what God has done for us. And I don't know where everybody in this room is at, whether they've been following Jesus since forever. They're showing up here and you might not even believe that Jesus was who he said he was. Coming into this Easter season, I want you to know that Jesus was real. He died a brutal death on the cross to rise again so that you could have a relationship with him. You could spend eternity with God. And you could have a life of purpose and hope that wasn't free of stress and pain, but had joy. And the next time tension comes into your life, I want you to be able to say, I know God is here for me. I know God shows up. To remember the ways in which God has been good to you in the past. I'll tell you what, that takes time. That takes remembering. Whoa, weird. To remember those times. And what my wife and I have done is making lists of how God has shown up. How when she went to work and when she left, that place was closed. That was the last day. She didn't have a job anymore. And all of a sudden, a month later, a check came in the mail for the exact amount she would have made that month. God showed up. For how we were driving 80 miles an hour on the road, 70, and all of a sudden, the fuel pump goes, and we've lost power, and we don't know where to go. Safely get off. We get to a place that takes care of us that day. How, for 2 years, we tried to start a family. Found out we couldn't. And then within 8 months, $35,000 were raised so my son could come home. God shows up. And when my car breaks down, and I'm not where I should be, and it costs more than I think, I'm able to say, but God still shows up. But God still takes care of me. This is tough. This is hard. I don't want to deal with this. But I can remember back. See, we need to remember the ways in which God has been good to you. We need to write them down. We need to make notes. We need to do what the people of Israel did and create tangible reminders in our lives. We need to do what Jesus did and take something ordinary and give it extraordinary value. That we need to revisit this list and add to it because God is at work. When you look at it and you say, man, God allowed me to find Parker Hill. I was able to be part of the 30-hour fast. I learned this. I saw God show up this way. I was able to go to the fall retreat. And I saw this. I was able to have a conversation with a little kid about Jesus. I was able to be somebody's first conversation about spiritual things. We need to revisit this list and add to it and add to it. Because remembering is what allows us to trust God even when we can't see what he's up to. It gives us those reference points to say, God is on the move. I don't know where he's moving, but God is on the move because I've seen him at work. And I know I'm not forgotten, and I know I'm not forsaken, and I know he can be trusted. So what we're going to do, just something a little different, something we haven't done ever. As a group, we're going to take communion together. Communion is a time when we as a church remember what Jesus has done for us. When we drink the cup and we eat the bread, remembering that Jesus sacrificed himself so that we could spend an eternity with him. So we're going to kind of go through it together before we break to small group. And for you, this may be an uncomfortable experience because you're like, this seems different and weird. Yeah. And we do this and we engage in this not because it's routine, but because it helps us remember what God has done for us. So Susie's going to pass out some juice, and because we are a student ministry, and Brian's going to pass out the bread. So grab a piece of bread and grab a juice box, and because we're Parker Hill Student Ministry, you get a Kool-Aid jammer, and uh, and so don't dive into it right away. I'll lead you guys through it. As you're getting it, feel free to puncture the hole. Also, feel free to take this time to connect with God, to talk about what he's done for you, to be honest and open. Maybe you need to clear the air. Thanks, Susie. Sorry. Jesus came together with his disciples. He took a piece of bread, said, "Eat this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup. "This is my blood poured out for you. Drink this in remembrance of me." Now, if you've been to Parker Hill and you've experienced a communion, you know automatically that this tastes way better than what they serve on Sunday. Don't say it. Don't tell anybody that. Like, they feel really good about it. But you don't have to eat it all. You don't have to drink it all. I don't know if grapes your jam. But again, the point is to take something ordinary so that we can remember it. Thanks, guys, so much for doing this and experiencing this with us. Head into small group where you're going to discuss it, and we will see you guys next week.